Hello, friends out there in movie land. Welcome back to the third episode of my continuing Criterion Collection tour. Today we are getting into some pretty good ones. So without any further ado or extra chat, let's dive right in. For our first one, we have a pretty biggie in the world of cinema, especially Japanese cinema. That is spine number 138, Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon. Very well known, highly celebrated movie from 1950. Which did a lot to solidify the use of flashback and different film language techniques that Kurosawa pioneered. It takes one particular story from 4 different viewpoints and really makes you think and second guess kind of the use of unreliable narrators and different perspectives of the same event happening. It was something that hadn't really been done that much in film before, as far as I know. And yeah, definitely kind of blew up for Kurosawa as being really inventive and really important. It also was either the first or one of the first times that Toshiro Mifune was on film, especially with Akira Kurosawa, and I believe he plays the bandit in this. And yeah, quite a movie. It's not... I haven't seen it in a long time. It's not, to me, as much of a favorite as some other Kurosawa ones. It's one that I kind of respect and understand its importance of, you know, the different techniques and different narratives and structure ideas, more than I maybe enjoy it itself. I'd have to rewatch it and sort of to give a more finite idea about my feelings on it, but that's what I can remember thinking about it when I watched it, maybe in like late college, so... either way, it's definitely one that should be seen, I think, by everybody, just to understand some of the cinematic techniques that Kurosawa was pioneering back in the 50s. So, really important piece of world cinema, and a lovely addition from Criterion. Last episode I talked about this feeling of putting off certain movies because you see them to be this important milestone in your watching of different genres. Maybe that's just a weird thing that I do, but this movie is definitely one of those. That is Fellini's 8½, from 1963, spine number 140. I have not seen this movie. It's been on my shelf for a while, and I know I should just dive in and do it. But every time I think about it, just something makes me be like, oh, yeah, are you ready for it? Which is weird. It's a strange thing to say, but it's been built up for me so much and talked about so much and mentioned so much and in different lists of movies and greatest of all time, best directors and all those kind of things, that I just haven't worked up the courage to watch it. Oh, strange thought, but it's sort of the way I feel about it. It's about a man who's a director, like an artist who's kind of projects are falling apart, and he goes through and looks at all the different women, the different liaisons in his life. I don't know that much more about it than that. The only Fellini film I've ever seen is... holy crap, what's the one with the peacock in the snow? Amarcord, which I didn't really understand when I saw it. I think seeing that first was a little weird because it's kind of like his love letter to like growing up, and I didn't really get it. Maybe I was a little young for it. I'm not sure. But yeah, Fellini's somebody who I want to get into more of because he's obviously talked about as a significant, force in world cinema. And yeah, 8½. Please let me know in the comments if what your feelings on on this film is, and if I should just bite the bullet and watch it and stop, being weird and neurotic.
Più arrabbiato, sei il produttore! Luisa, non te la sarei mica presa a male, è soltanto uno scherzo, così, una storia fantastica. Avanti, senza fermarti mai! Avanti!
Here we have our first example of Chinese cinema so far in the Criterion Collection, and that is Wong Kar-wai's In the Mood for Love. From 2000, so again, a more recent one to enter the Criterion Collection. Spine number 147. This is a a beautifully photographed, just immaculately paced, sad love story. It has a very bittersweet feel to it. You know, people who are unhappy in their lives, a man and a woman, and who pass each other in the periphery of their lives and have this longing and drawing towards each other, but at the same time this feeling of responsibility towards the other people in their lives. It's quite poetically beautiful, as a lot of Wong Kar-wai's stuff tends to be, kind of focusing on the, I don't know what you would call it, like the types of inconsistencies or the types of different problems of the human condition that put together, like wanting one thing but feeling like you need to do something else. These conflicts within the human soul. That's kind of Wong Kar-wai's jam. I would love to get more of his movies, either on Criterion, or especially Chungking Express is like one of the really hard to find Criterion Blu-rays, like out of print and very expensive. But this is a movie that I do really like. I love the actors in it, Tony Leung and Maggie Cheung. Both fantastic performances, and you know, again, very kind of slowly paced, beautifully shot, and just a nice meditation, kind of a tone poem on conflicts of the human soul, and a lot of eating noodles, which I fucking love noodles. So Chinese food is my favorite. So, you know, like I get a little bit of that in here too. Definitely, I would recommend checking this out. In the Mood for Love. Yeah, a classic.
When you're near me, I'm in the mood for love. Heaven is in your eyes.
This one is a pretty recent acquisition for me. This is Andrei Tarkovsky's Solaris from 1972 and spine number 164 in the collection. I have not seen this yet. I weirdly have seen the, I think, Steven Soderbergh, George Clooney remake. Again, maybe when I was in late college. I watched that and enjoyed it. Wasn't huge on it, but I do want to get into this. I basically ordered this after watching Stalker, which like blew my fucking mind, and wanting to get more into Tarkovsky. And he's this kind of guy, like a lot of people talk about how he like paints with time, like sculpts time, I think is like a phrase people use around him. His movies, at least Stalker and some other, you know, bits that I've seen from his other movies, tend to have long shots, not a lot of cuts, kind of presenting you these shots and these ideas and these pictures and these people and letting them move through space and time and just letting you observe and absorb what they're going through. I know that this is a sort of sci-fi, psychological, I don't know if thriller is the right word, but it's set aboard a space station. I think people are like disappearing, but then maybe they come back and are like, are they copies? At least that's what I sort of remember the remake being about. Yeah, I think Tarkovsky is somebody who I don't particularly well at the moment, but based on what I know about him and what I've seen from him, i.e. Stalker, I can't wait to kind of dig into this guy and see, because he feels like one of those sources, like maybe like a Stanley Kubrick or something, where like as much as you want to dig out and get, it's there for you. You know, his stuff has the depth to keep on digging and keep on unveiling new layers, which is always super exciting to me to see in cinema.
Эй, где вы все? Здесь гости, прием.
I talked about this movie in part 1 of my Criterion Collection overview, and that is The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp by Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger, from 1943, spine number 173. This I just watched recently, and it's a beautiful movie. The photography alone, the Technicolor photography, is unbelievable. It looks amazing. I mean, considering that this was shot in 1943, the clarity of color and of picture is stunning. This is a really, I think, brave and interesting movie for the time that it was made. You know, being made in the tail ends of World War II in England, it does a very smart thing where it takes sort of a long view of history and a long view of a man's life and shows that the things that kind of are happening now, if you just look at what's going on right now in the world, you're kind of missing this whole tapestry of what led up to that point. And it has a very moving story about a man going from being a sort of young stud, adventurous and out there into, old age and slowing down and getting stuck in his ways and losing touch a little bit with what needs to happen to make the world progress. And I think that's a very universal story, right? I mean, that's a struggle of all generations of losing touch with the generation that's underneath you and feeling like the ways that you've created are the only ways to do things. And it just takes a really beautiful look at that and how, the sadness created by turmoil over time and people's relationships coming apart and coming together and things you left undone that you regret for the rest of your life. And it does a whole lot with just seemingly kind of a war story, I guess. At the time, it was pretty controversial because it makes suggestions towards the fact that the Nazis and World War II is a new type of terrible warfare, and we can't be the proper British gentleman out of touch with, the world that we once were in World War I and, during imperialist days of the British Empire in the late 1800s. And, we need to do something that's new and that's going to combat this new menace. And, at the time, I think Winston Churchill was quite against it, and there were some problems with production, that they couldn't get the, military equipment that they wanted to use the films. They had to borrow and get it from all these weird places. But I think time wins out for this one and really says that even if it was controversial in the 40s and maybe it said some stuff that people didn't want to hear, it took a more holistic view of history and human experience, and I think it's much smarter and richer for that. So yeah, you should definitely check it out. Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, an epic of a single man's life, and encapsulates a lot of the problems of human experience, which I think the best types of movies do.
Music! Ready! Moose!
Speaking of the problems of human experience, this next one is Sam Peckinpah's Straw Dogs from 1971. This is a tough film, but I really enjoyed it. It is pretty notorious for some graphic sexual assault, rape scenes, as well as just graphic violence. But it's just a fascinating examination. Peckinpah, from what I've seen of him, which is not a great amount of his stuff, but of what I've read and watched from him, it's this fascinating confluence of masculinity, of overwhelming, manly toughness, but then looking at it and saying wow, that attitude and that kind of overwhelming ability or inability to access all parts of yourself, just to be this tough man and to not let other parts of yourself in, leads to some terrible consequences, which is what happens at the end of Straw Dogs. It's a very interesting, dissection of masculinity. I think especially today when people are talking about, toxic masculinity and the failure of society and people to address some of the problems that men have. It's a touchy subject, right? But, a lot of violence perpetrated by men coming about as a result of needing to fit into these certain masculine roles. And, this is a very violent and nasty exploration of that, but it is, I think, nonetheless kind of tackling some of those issues. Kind of feels a little bit to me like Taxi Driver in that sense, like looking at what people who are on the edge of society and have that problem sort of fitting in feel it's tenuous link, but I kind of get a little vibes from it. But it's really well shot. It's really well put together. It can be tough to watch in parts, but yeah, Dustin Hoffman gives a great performance. I believe that this was remade not too long ago, maybe in like the early 2000s. I would recommend watching it if you have the stomach for this kind of thing, because yeah, you know, it has some graphic sex and violence in it, but a really interesting examination of you know, different types of men in the world and how they may prey or not prey on each other and what you need to do to stand up to them. And yeah, lots of loaded questions.
Find peace and refuge. Instead, he found that a man can't hide forever.
I care. This is where I live. I will not allow violence against this house.
And our final film for today is another sort of big moment in Japanese cinema. That is Throne of Blood from 1957. It's a adaptation loosely of Shakespeare's Macbeth. Sort of the story of this outsider rising, you know, and his wife doing these shady things to rise into power and to be at sort of this spot of control, and sort of the way that their control in their lives spiral out after sacrificing so much to get to this spot. A very iconic ending with arrows coming. You might have seen it, a sort of all of these arrows being shot at Mifune as he's running around and like sort of yelling at the world, screaming into the void of you know, not wanting to surrender what he's earned even after all the terrible things he's done to get to that point. It's not my favorite Kurosawa, but definitely one worth checking out, especially because it has some of the vibes that Kurosawa was like adapting, you know, Western classics and tragedies, something he did on a number of occasions, taking different stories from like Western kind of canon, I don't know what you want to call it, classic literature, and turning that into Japanese sort of set, like feudal dramas. So yeah, Throne of Blood, some excellent scenes. Not my favorite Kurosawa, which I feel like I've said for a couple movies now, but definitely one that you should at least check out and give a watch through.
その権力の座を争う者、そしてそれを血であがなった者の末路は、血で血を洗う戦国絵巻。
And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, my camera's about to run out of batteries. It seems like a perfect time to end. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll be back with part 4 in not too long.